Let's see. Says it's loading. This is like my 15th time doing this. I'm still not used to it.
Sure.
Well, I guess we're live then.
Okay.
Whoever's listening now or later, this is your new favorite show where we talk about comics, basically. Creators to creators, hopefully. Today I am with Mike, the creator of Samurai and Dinosaurs. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Murphy, freelance writer-artist based out of the Pacific Northwest.
Mhm. And I guess the usual opening question that I always ask is, how did you get involved with your current project? Have you been following indie comics? How would everybody have been introduced to you, I guess, is the question. It's
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. This is actually the second time that we ran the campaign for Samurais and Dinosaurs. The first time around, I've been joking with people. The first time around was kind of the marketing and promotion for the actual campaign. Basically, we launched last December. We did everything the wrong way. We launched in December, like 2 weeks before Christmas.
Mhm.
And and heading into January and February, like those are bad months to do crowdfunding as well. I just kind of dove into the whole scene, and little by little, people got to know me and know Selena. Sergio, to a lesser extent, he's the artist on the book, and it became clear that we were going to have to relaunch. And I took a few weeks and reconfigured a few things, and we launched in March, and we made our goal. I think we played things smarter. But basically, the project itself was originally a submission that Sergio and I made a handful of years ago to all the usual suspects in the comic industry. And once all the rejection letters came in, it just kind of got shelved. And when my wife and I committed to going full self-publishing, full crowdfunding, like Samurai and Dinosaurs was kind of the first thing that came to mind, because to this day, it's like one of the favorite things that I've written, and I think it's the best thing Sergio's done. And we just really wanted to find a wider home and a broader audience for it.
What was the initial spark that got you started on this project?
Sure. Well, to be honest, it started off kind of as a joke. My wife and I, however long ago it was, like I think 2009 or 2010, we went to go see Cowboys and Aliens,
Oh,
or
okay.
Cowboys versus Aliens, and like we weren't big fans of it, and we were doing that thing driving home of like we just started laughing about it, and like we tried coming up with like the dumbest like mashups we could think of. And at some point, like I said Samurai and Dinosaurs, and we laughed for a few seconds, but then it was that moment of like, well, that actually sounds kind of cool.
Hmm.
And I immediately thought of like Akira Kurosawa and Ray Harryhausen, and it became that thing of like, well, what if this was the movie that they never made together?
Okay. So you'll have one of the things I guess I could ask about then is film. Are you a huge film lover?
Oh yeah, I'm a big film buff.
Well, that's good. I wouldn't call myself a huge film buff anymore. I
Uh-huh.
guess I've become disillusioned. But in my 20s, I had a huge phase where I would go to the library and bring home stacks and stacks of movies,
Nice.
usually from these lists that like Roger Ebert, right? Like
Hmm.
he had a great movies list, and I discovered Kurosawa and all that stuff, or rediscovered him.
That's
And
excellent.
Do you, well, I guess I could ask, what kind of films do you love, and how does that relate to your inspirations for the book?
Sure. Well, in my college years, Kurosawa was a big influence. When I was a teenager, I kind of fell into films because like that was the heyday for like Tarantino and Smith and Rodriguez. Um, and from them, like I kind of broadened out and like went further back and back and back, like to Scorsese and David Lynch, and then further back from that. And then, by the time college rolls around, you start getting into like the Kurosawas. Um, yeah, so I think overall, like my favorite genres are like crime, horror, uh, and probably sci-fi. But honestly, like for me, it's just about good storytelling and enjoyable tales, I guess.
Mhm.
So like it's rare that like I find a genre that I don't like. Um, so like I was saying, with Samurai and Dinosaurs, like I thought back on obviously like Seven Samurai, and with Harryhausen, I started thinking about like Valley of the Guanji, which is basically cowboys versus dinosaurs. And yeah, like pretty soon, like the story just kind of like started spilling out of my head, and uh, I had like a very loose outline to work off of, and within I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I had the script complete for like this entire like 110 page thing.
And you were already in touch with your artist then?
Yeah, Sergio and I go way back to like maybe 2000, 2001. We met on Mark Miller's message boards when he launched those way back in the day. And we worked on a handful of things. We worked on a superhero project and a few other submissions. And like his style differs slightly from how Samurai looks. But I thought something about his European cartooning approach would really work with the book, and so I asked him to kind of meld his regular style with stuff like Usagi Yojimbo and Lone Wolf and Cub,
Yeah.
and we found a pretty happy medium, and I'm really thrilled with how the book turned out, and yeah, like we've known each other forever.
Do you have a lot of manga in your background as far as reading?
A little bit. Like back in college, that was when the whole Tokyo Pop thing hit big. I was a big fan of the Battle Royale adaptation by Keith Giffen, and yeah, like a handful of stuff here and there. Like one of the things that I just read about a year ago was Opus. It's do you know who Satoshi Kon is?
Yes.
Okay.
The director, of course, of films like Perfect Blue and
Yeah,
Heavenly
Millennium
Dawn.
Actress.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sadly, like he died about 6 or 7 years ago. Um, but yeah, Opus was I didn't know this. Like before he got into directing, he was a manga artist, and Opus is really like his first work, and like it obviously shows its age. It's from like the late '80s and early '90s, but even in there, you can see a lot of stuff like thematically that he would go on to explore later in his career.
If I recall, it has a sort of Akira-ish vibe. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, a lot. And what's the other one that he did? Domu.
yes, we're talking about the creator of Akira,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name.
Otomo, Otomo something.
Yeah.
Katsuhiro Otomo,
Yes.
I think. Yeah, and that was a wild book too. There was an interesting trend in manga back then. I don't think
Hmm.
it's common these days where they would actually spend a lot of time on their pages. Whereas nowadays, I think manga is meant to be read really quickly, so they don't spend a lot of time per page.
Yeah, and not just with manga, I can't help but feel that that translates down to anime as well. I mean, like 10, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago was like kind of this sweet spot for both manga and anime where there was like really crazy experimental stuff going on, both with the art and storytelling.
Mhm.
And now it just feels like it's being made to be consumed as fast as possible. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it just, it's a change I've noticed.
Yeah, I suppose a part of it. I actually had the privilege of visiting the studio that was making Naruto, the animation, and I just you can look in the eyes of the people working on it, and they just seemed so tired. It was like
Hmm.
a little cave. It was like a basement with no windows, and I guess that's necessary for this kind of heavy production. But I couldn't help hearing about like how production at these studios is really strict, and it just takes so much out of you. And when a series has such high quality, it really wears down the team working on it. So it almost makes sense that that a lot of series are just kind of slapped together and just get it out the door. We'll see what happens. And then the really serious, famous stuff like Akira, you hear about stories of people like chain smoking and going mad as they're
Yeah,
working on it. It's
yeah, it's that weird thing, man, of like, like, and I'm sure like a lot of this could be applied to something like the video game industry, like this stuff that like kind of lives on forever and has like this huge legacy behind it. Also, with that legacy comes a bunch of really negative stuff, but I don't know, like. I don't know what the happy medium is there because my brain goes like, well, yeah, I don't like the idea of some dude working a 120-hour work week, but man, that movie looks really good, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the key word there is art
Right,
versus are we creating a product? And a lot of
right,
times animation studios are just doing what's the word I'm looking for? They just take a contract to work on a series. It's not something that is a work of art to them. Whereas you'll hear about an animation done by one guy and it's only 5 minutes long, but he spent like 2 years doing it. And I don't mind consuming and enjoying something from someone like that because they knew the consequences and they didn't force anyone to do it. I
right.
personally don't feel that kind of guilt, let's say, as an artist myself, or I don't like to use that word for myself, but let's say a creator.
Hmm.
I don't mind doing long hours as long as the product is something that I'm proud of. But I would hate to do that to someone else. I couldn't make someone else work the kind of hours that I do. Once you get in the zone, anyway, I don't consider it work.
Right, right.
Maybe I don't know if you felt the same way while writing or something like that, but
Oh yeah, and I like I work as an illustrator too. So
ah,
yeah, like I you definitely hit that point where you start at like 8 or 9 at night, and then all of a sudden it's 3:15 in the morning.
there's I guess I've heard it's called the flow state. Have you heard something like that?
Yeah, it's almost like this meditative state where like you're conscious of what you're doing, but not at the same time.
Yeah, I found it happens at the weirdest times, but they say it's when your challenge level is very high, but then your
Mhm.
talent level is also matching it.
Right,
Whereas if one or the other is deficient, you'll either be frustrated or bored.
right.
And but yeah, there have been times where I was like painting something and it wasn't really important, but I would lose track of time. I would forget to eat. I would not go to the bathroom.
Right, exactly.
Suddenly it was nighttime. But that's really a meditative is a good way to put it.
Sure. Yeah, it's I mean just because of like my work schedule and balancing that with like my home life, that's kind of that's a rare luxury to afford myself creatively these days. But yeah, like I do remember those times and I miss them.
Now you mentioned being a parent well, not recently, but how does that affect the production process? If you want to talk
Um,
about it, we can skip.
yeah, of course, it's fine. My wife and I are still figuring that out. Um, Part of the complication is, like if one parent works outside and one parent is a stay-at-home parent, or if both parents work, and you have either like a sitter or you take them to like a caregiver. Um, yeah, these things tend to balance themselves out, but our situation is complicated in that we both work from home. So that temptation is there to just spend all day with Clark, our son, and certainly there have been days where we've done that, especially earlier. But now that we're coming up on him being a year old, we're trying to figure out a better work-life balance to all that stuff. It's difficult though, because the thing that we're gonna try to start doing is like I watch him for 2 hours while she works, and then like we switch off, and we do that every 2 hours for like 8 to 10 hours a day. Um, but there's still going to be instances where like one person will need the other person to help out with this or that. Like, hey, I'm in the middle of changing his diaper, but the dog really has to go out, or like, whatever's on the stove is about to boil over. So like there's going to be instances where even though mentally you're telling yourself, hey, I'm going to work for like 2.5 hours straight, no interruptions, like it's kind of wishful thinking in a way. But I mean, we're working on it, and
Mhm.
I'm sure, especially once he gets towards like 2 and 3, like a lot of the pressure of having to do literally everything for him will start to ease off, and that'll put less pressure on us.
I see. The reason I'm asking is because I've within a year ago I've been married, and we're talking about what are we going to do when we have kids and that sort of thing. And I've always worked from home. I'm also a freelancer like you, and I've always wondered how that's going to be a balance between if I go into full production on a comic, let's say.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how other people balance that out. I just think it's interesting and fascinating how people arrange their schedules. Like, maybe if you're a night person, do you consider yourself a night person? Do you work at night?
Kind of, yeah. Like, the thing about having a kid is your schedule is whatever the kid's schedule is. Like the first four, yeah, I'd say about the first 4 months of their life. Um, like, and even like the doctors will tell you this, like when the baby sleeps, you sleep. Because that's the only chance that you're going to have to sleep.
Mhm.
Um, but after that, like they start developing their own sleep rhythm, and now our schedule is he's up by about 9 a.m., so we're up at 9 a.m., and he takes like 2 to 3 naps throughout the day, and those are about an hour to an hour and a half each. So that's where we kind of budget our time. It's like, okay, now I can go pick up lunch for us, or I can take care of these emails, or I can take a nap. Um, and then he's in bed by like 9:30 or 10 at night. And, again, at least until he's about a year and a half, that's going to be how it is. And, the evening kind of becomes like, okay, well, it's 10:30. Let's work till about 2:30, and then we'll call it a night. And he's kind of our natural alarm clock.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's a lot of interesting questions to ask about this, but maybe I'll just go back to the book for a little bit. I don't want to take the attention away from the product itself, of course.
No,
Um,
it's all good, man. Like, I'm just here for the conversation.
Of course. I do also want to make sure that whoever's listening, well, for instance, we have our friend Gateway into Comics listening who says he has backed your book.
Yes, he
Uh,
has.
I definitely want to put our best foot forward and make sure that people are aware of the project and interested. Whoever might not have decided to get a copy, maybe we can convince them today. Um, so, what's the story or the outline of the story about? It's, of course, about samurai and dinosaurs, but.
Yeah. Sure. So, Samurai and Dinosaurs is about an elite group of 8 samurai who are dispatched to investigate a downed meteorite on the edge of the countryside. Um, what happens along their journey is time begins to break down and fracture all around them. And when they reach their destination, what they discover is the meteorite is acting as kind of a thorn in time, and dinosaurs are bleeding out from the Jurassic era into feudal Japan.
Interesting. So it's I don't want to ask spoiler questions, but is it a sort of thing where there's a lot of them or they're trickling in? Do they have to find out where the source is and close it?
They have to figure out a way to deal with the meteorite itself. Whatever that means, they're kind of, it's the whole thing of like jumping out of a plane without a parachute and figuring out something on the way down.
I see.
Um, but as far as the amount of dinosaurs, since there's no mass transit, since there's no rapid way to get from point A to B, and let alone get message out from point A to B,
Mhm.
this happens over the course of a year. Everything that happens over the course of a year before they're even on the road to the meteorite. So the countryside and the surrounding forested area around where the meteorite fell is kind of fully infested with raptors and other types of the more carnivorous dinosaurs.
Mhm.
So they kind of have to deal with them every step of the way.
Is there, as they're on their adventure, is
Hmm.
there sort of, I guess they have to form a plan eventually, but is their goal to just kill every dinosaur? Do they have to sort of figure out what their goal even is along the way?
Sure, because they have to figure out what their goal is along the way. Because the initial reports are there are monsters terrorizing the countryside, and
Yeah.
the only evidence of any type of monster is the Daimyo, who the Daimyo is the one that orders them on this quest. And Daimyos, for those who don't know, back in feudal Japan, they answered to the shogun and the emperor, and they kind of acted as somewhere between governors and sheriffs for individual cities and towns throughout the empire. So this particular daimyo, his name's Katai, um, all he produces as evidence is a single raptor tooth for the group. And he and the main character Ren have a dark history together, so there's tension there, and it's kind of clear from the get-go that Katai knows more than he's letting on, but he's telling them just enough to get their asses on the road.
Hmm.
So they have very little info. They don't even know if, there are monsters, in quotes, to deal with at all, or if this is just like a giant bear, or they don't know. And they kind of get pushed into the deep end pretty quick along the way.
And as far as equipment goes, I'm sure they have their swords, bows and arrows, that sort of thing. They're probably woefully unprepared for this.
Yeah, well, they are for the most part. So the one like we play fast and loose with like historical accuracy because
Uh,
uh Sergio and I just wanted more than anything to just produce like a fun pulpy tale. But the one like straight out fantastical part of the story is there's a soldier in the group who goes by the name Tetsuban Doragon, and he has created a piece of dragon mech armor for himself that kind of operates based off of steam, and it's crafted out of bamboo and steel.
okay. So there's a definite looseness, like you said. I see.
Yeah. So, obviously he's kind of the tank of the group. We have the leader, the assassin, the wild card, and so everyone kind of falls into their specific specialty, and we try throughout the story to make sure to give every one of them a moment to shine.
Is I forget if there was a length. Did you mention, is it going to be the project? Is it just one book or is it going to be a series?
It was, a few years ago when we created it, it was definitely designed to be a standalone product. At the end, there's no dot, 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 or is it? It was definitely a one and done story. Um, that being said, both talking to people in the scene and talking to backers, there's interest in potential sequels, and I tossed out there both on social media and on like one or two other streams that I did, like a rough outline of what we would do with sequels, but if we get to do them, they're easily like a year and a half to 2 years off. So a direct sequel would probably be called Samurai and Dinosaurs Ijime, which is Japanese for bully or mean person. And then we want to broaden out the concept further and wider. So book 3 would be Detectives and Dinosaurs, and book 4 would be Astronauts and Dinosaurs.
Are they going to be loosely tied to this series or just a
Oh,
time
they're
jump?
right. The whole thing is directly one story from start to finish
I
in
see.
in the same universe.
Okay.
I think it was Professor Geek who said, so essentially what you're saying is the meteorite is the main character. And yeah, that's kind of true.
Man, Professor Geek's so smart.
He's a really smart dude.
I gotta try to get in touch with him sometime.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned Japanese. Did you ever study it? It sounds like you're fairly knowledgeable.
My wife and I tried studying it for about a year because around 2007 or 2008 there was an opportunity for us to move out there. So yeah, we tried studying the language, and we memorized like a few words, a few sentences, like basically enough to be functional out there if we had to move. And then like we would just kind of learn more as we went along. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, like once we made the commitment to staying here in the States and specifically Portland, like we just kind of lost track of it, and now most of that knowledge has escaped my brain.
Yeah, I was in a similar position. I took it in high school for 3 years, actually, and
Oh wow,
I, I was into anime and manga and stuff, so I just thought it was a natural fit. I had to take a language course, and
sure.
I spent most of my. I was very irresponsible back then, and in some ways I still am, but I just drew a lot, and I didn't study it as seriously as I wanted to, because I never really knew if I would ever need it. But
Hmm.
then, 10, 15 years later, I actually did go to Japan, and I regret not knowing the language way better. I don't know, for various reasons, but next time I go, I want to teach myself with this vague dream that someday maybe indie comics will explode to the point where our books can be in Japanese or something, and then I want to try to like go there and sell books or something.
That'd be
So
great.
I think that's a good goal or a reason to study a language. I can't just do it for fun, but aside from reading the manga, I would love to be able to read manga in its native language. That sounds fun.
Yeah, totally. I mean, aside from like manga and anime, like I dig the culture. My wife is a huge fan of the culture, and it's funny. Like even though for the foreseeable future we're still going to be here in the States, like there could be the possibility of us still moving over there later in life. One of the things that would help and maybe even tie back into what you're talking about having independent books published in Japanese. We have a friend who is going to be moving from here to Japan next year, and he owns and operates a comic store, and he's selling his shares to the other person that co-owns it. But when he gets over there, like he's not sure what he's doing. But one of the possibilities is starting up another bookstore or possibly like a distribution or publishing front.
Wow. There's a lot of
So
people here that I'm sure would love to translate their books.
yeah, I know. So yeah, like as next year gets closer, we have to sit down with him and have some serious talks about like, all right, dude. So like, what are you doing? And if you're thinking about this road, like, how can we help out or be involved?
Oh my. I'm always looking for a decent investment, so let me know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'll keep you in the loop.
Sounds good. I'm also a huge Japan person in general. Like, this could easily become a whole podcast about how much we love it. So
I know,
I,
right?
I don't know if we want to go down that road. I personally wouldn't mind, but I don't want to, waste
Sure. No,
everyone's time. But so you mentioned Japanese history, for example. You talk about Kurosawa. Is there specific, like, are you a huge lover of the history, or is it just a broad strokes you like the culture? What is it about them that you like so much?
uh, I guess it's more the broad strokes. There's not to get too artsy about it, but I kind of like culturally the juxtaposition they have where they have these like huge, super condensed, always on, always living cities, and you can go 20, 30, 45 minutes to the west or east or just pick a direction, and you're in like really, really quiet, sedate farmland type areas. Like it's kind of like a super compacted version of the Midwest almost. Because like originally I'm from Chicago,
Mhm.
and people who haven't been to Chicago kind of picture it as this like endlessly sprawling thing, kind of like, the East Coast with like Manhattan and, places like that. And really, like, Chicago is a super big city and a couple of really big boroughs, but if you just drive like 30 minutes like west or south, like you'll find yourself within like an hour or so in farmlands,
Mm.
and and like nothing else until you hit like Wisconsin, you know.
Yeah, I remember I was really struck by that. I went to a con, I think it was called Wizard Con in Chicago when I
Hmm.
was 19. And then my friends and I drove from there to Tennessee, and I was amazed. I was raised and grew up in New Jersey, so I just thought the whole country looked like this, but I was
Right,
very
right,
wrong.
right.
Very wrong. And I was just amazed how much, like, I'll use the word nothing, but it's not really nothing. It's just, I was amazed by how open the whole rest of the country was. It was beautiful, but it's
Sure.
not the kind of landscape I was ever used to seeing.
Yeah, back in 2014, my wife and I had to move my mom from Chicago out here to Portland, and we did it by driving. And so that was kind of the first time that like I got to see the entire scope of the country. We drove through like 5 states, and yeah, like I hear what you're saying. Like it's not nothing, but it's as close to nothing as you can get.
Just gorgeous open space. If you have the right music, and I always like joke with myself, being a trucker was one of the jobs that I was seriously considering. I
Right,
just love driving, and
right.
I don't know. It's one of my dreams is to who knows when or if this will ever happen, but I would take one of my books or a bunch of my books and do just this giant tour through the whole country, going from comic shop to comic shop, selling my books, and I would get to see the whole country. Um, it's more romantic than realistic, but I just it sounds like so much fun. I've never been to Portland though. The closest I've been was Seattle, but
Okay.
I understand that they're very similar geologically.
Geologically, yeah. Like socially and in terms of the way like the cities are built, they're very different though.
Mm.
So Seattle is because we just went to Seattle 2 years ago for the first time.
Mm.
Seattle is much more of a an example of the whole sprawling urban city thing, like a Chicago. As a matter of fact, there was this the area of Seattle that we stayed in felt very much like Chicago. Um, whereas Portland, Portland's weird. Um, so like there's the downtown area, like the immediate city area, but that's really only about maybe 8 square miles. And then immediately you start running into bridges, and the bridges expand out into these little boroughs, and like you have the northwest and the southeast and the southwest and the northeast. Um, and each of those areas outside of the city are kind of their own little functioning cities in their own rights, even though they're just parts of Portland. Um, like like we're based southwest-ish, and like southwest and southeast are radically different from each other, but realistically, all that separates them is a river.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I don't know. I've talked about this a lot on other streams. We're kind of at the point where like we we're considering our options about moving like in the future because when we first moved here in 2005, Portland was kind of exactly what we needed it to be at that point in our lives. And there have been so many like social and political and outside of that stuff, even just like the construction and the kind of groundswell of people moving in from California and Washington, like it's become this like really congested city that was never built to hold this many people.
Hmm.
And that's in part like what's kind of radically changing the makeup of the city.
It's interesting to compare that, what you're describing, to where I live. And I guess New Jersey and any coastal city, really,
Hmm.
suburban areas, urban areas, they have these giant clusters and then a million districts inside. You can go from one block to another, and it's like walking through a portal into a completely different city.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then we talked about Japan, and I remember when I visited for the short time that I visited, it was ancient and yet modern, and there were so many, like, they're such an interesting country and an interesting culture because they've, how do I put it, like their culture has evolved through the past 100, maybe 200 years
Hmm.
so shockingly fast, that it's almost like they don't know who they want to be, or they're constantly trying to redefine it. Culturally, it was only a few hundred years ago where they were still walking around with swords and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
of
then
course.
and then as soon as they started trading with the West, I mean, they had the isolationist policies going on for a while, and that didn't work out. And then they started expanding with the empire ideas, and that didn't work out. And now,
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, culturally they're all over the place, and like the people talk about places like New York or LA being like the cutting edge of like what's culturally just around the corner, but I feel like places like New York and LA just kind of crib all their stuff from what's going on in Japan because like they go through these phases like almost like on a monthly rate where something is like just discovered and then it blows up real quick and everyone's in the know and then all of a sudden like they've dropped it and they're on to something else.
well, I suppose there's a sort of thought within Japan of we always have to try to put in 110%. And I don't know if this
Sure.
is a result of the post-war thinking. It might be. But then, even though, no, they were doing that before the war as well.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean like obviously, like culturally and mentally and psychologically, obviously, like the war and the bombs had like a huge impact on them. But whether that's positive or I think there was some positive that came with them rebuilding themselves, but uh, I think there is some negative as well because like if you look at where they're at kind of culturally and mentally like right now, things especially with like the younger generations, things kind of seem very scattershot at the moment.
Yeah, I've seen that they're sort of always going through some kind of identity crisis.
Right, and
Um,
like there's population issues.
right. I guess it's not a rumor, is it, that they just aren't having very many kids, and we don't know what's causing it.
Right.
Um, I don't know, but there's a
Yeah, I mean honestly that's well, I mean he loves the culture and that's ultimately why he's going, but part of why our friend is relocating next year is he's visited Japan like about 5 times over the past 2 years, and every time he comes back, all he tells us is, "You have no idea how much more affordable Japan, even in the heart of Tokyo, it is to live as opposed to here in Portland."
really.
Yeah, just there's not enough people to meet the supply and demand of just daily life in a major city like Tokyo.
I had no idea, but I guess compared to, I have been hearing rumors that it's very expensive to live in the Northwest.
Oh, it's
Um,
ridiculous.
and of course, Japan's always had that stigma as well. Um, my goodness.
Yeah, like he was because what people do is they like show you their slideshow when they get back of like everything they did, and he was like he was just pointing out all these like little sushi stands, sushi restaurants, 5-star restaurants. He was like this cost me like $6, this cost me like $15, and it's like this huge ornate thing where like if you were to even attempt to get something like that here in America, it would be like a 70-80 dollar meal.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the stands are, you're just literal like little hut on the side of the road where a guy cooks in front of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, or like the reason he went this last time is there's a lot of like sushi makers slash bars that are just kind of hidden in alleyways, and like so this one that he really liked, like you step into this doorway and like what looks like just a rundown building is like this huge ornate restaurant on the inside. He had made friends with this guy who ran this really nice sushi slash bar, and like the guy just couldn't afford to keep the lights on anymore because there was no one visiting. So like he went out to like have the last meal that the guy prepared for his patrons.
Wow. That's the most Japanese thing I've ever heard.
I know.
Well, I still joke around with my family about like the symbol of the Sakura tree, and it's almost sad, romantic, fatalistic.
Sure.
But that's, I don't know, it just suits my personality. I'm just kind of always like, I don't know how to describe it, but I think there's I don't know, it works for my personality, I suppose.
No, I get you, and it's kind of the same for us. Like Selena in particular, like I've always had an appreciation, and I have a feeling that when I get to visit Japan, I'll absolutely fall in love with it.
Mhm.
But like Selena, for the better part of her entire life, has just been uh, not even I don't want to say obsessed, but just compelled almost by the idea of the Japanese lifestyle.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess it's just something that you feel. You can't
Yeah.
really explain it. But when I hear about the way other people live in other places of the world, and I think, wow, these are, like I joke, like I have a Greek body and American brain, but my soul is Japanese.
I feel you,
something
man. I feel you.
something about them. I just feel like, wow, these are somehow I feel really connected to their culture and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
Um, Not to keep talking about Japan for so much, but I can never stop talking about how much I love them. But I also am curious to ask about some questions about the industry if you're interested.
Yeah, that's sure, man.
One of the questions I like to ask people is sort of what's your take? Like, if we put our hands on the pulse of the current comics industry as it stands in America, at the very least, and how it relates to what we're doing, where do you think comics stands now, and where do you think it's going?
Um, okay, I can answer that in two parts. The story that I always recount whenever I do a stream is the main. There were a couple things that made us commit to just going fully independent and crowdfunding and all that. The main instance, though, was Selena and I took a meeting at IDW last year. And because they had recently opened up a satellite office here in Portland. And so we're taking a tour of this very nice office building, like in kind of the pseudo industrial area of Portland. And it's all brick, and like there are like framed original pieces of art all over, and like some of the brick is plastered over with like misprint pages from those archive editions they put out. And it just drips money, right? And so, like, we take this tour, and then we get up to the office, and he sits down with us, and the first thing he says is, "None of us are doing this to get rich." And like, my wife and I, after 10 years, on the outskirts of the industry and like doing odd jobs here and there for like indie guys and small publishers, like we'd been so indoctrinated to the idea of like the starving artist that my immediate reaction was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, money, what's that? Like, we're just here to make comics.
Yeah.
And like an hour later, we're driving home, and I snap out of it. I'm like, wait, I'm doing this to get rich. Like, I want to make a living.
Yeah.
What is he talking about? And so that was kind of like the breaking point for us trying to work within the industry. And
Jeez.
I, it's been a year, and I mean, we all read the same news. Like, IDW and most of the smaller publishers aren't in any better state than they were then, and in a lot of cases, they're in worse straits.
Mhm.
Um, and then you have DC and Marvel making very clear moves outside of the direct market. You have DC taking up shelves, creating and taking up shelf space in Walmart. Um, You have Marvel licensing their IPs out to small publishers like IDW. And it's just, from my perspective, at least, kind of being in the thick of it and hearing what I hear, because there are so many industry people based here in Portland. Um, I just, I don't see, okay. It's a hope for the best, plan for the worst type of situation where it's like, obviously, I don't want people that I care about to lose their jobs, be it in the industry or as, like running comic shops. But at the same time, I don't really see things getting better. And if the choices are, as a small publisher, keep banging your head against that wall and hope that someone will invite you in, even though you know they can't financially support you,
Mhm.
or strike out on your own, try to build up your own audience, and either weather the storm, or if this is just the new status quo moving forward, well, at least you're in a lifeboat. Um, that's not much of a choice to my wife and I.
Mhm.
So yeah, like I hope that what we know of as the comics industry can bounce back and improve. But based on a lot of the decisions that they're making and actions that they're taking, I don't see that happening.
the story that you mentioned with IDW and the publishers strikes a chord with me because the few times I've spoken to publishers or been to their offices to make pitches,
Hmm.
at least here in the States, I get that vibe of, well, let me put it like this. My grandma has a little saying that she says, or it's a Greek saying, uh, translated to the fish stinks from its head, which basically means, if something is going wrong in a company or in a culture, you have to look at its leadership.
Right.
And when I go to their offices and I talk to the editors and lead editors and whoever else wants to talk to me, I
Hmm.
just get this idea of we don't really know what we're doing. We're just following market trends. And
Right.
then when they are introduced to new ideas, like let's say, I don't know, I'll pitch a story to them. They seem interested, but then they have to look at, has this ever been done before? Oh, this is too new. It's too much of a risk. So maybe they are not willing to reach into their pockets to fund or to pay for advances on a story that they don't know that they can market, let's say.
Sure.
But then I get the idea that I've always wanted to do indie stuff anyway. Uh, and why shouldn't I take the risk
Hmm.
and keep all of the benefits myself? I really want to sort of rub it in the face of these publishers, if I could, to say, like, wow, you wouldn't take a risk on my stuff, but look at where the market's going. And there's almost no risk involved if you're a creator. Well, I guess the best investments you can make are investments in yourself or something
Right.
that you can control. So I'm going to pitch a story, let's say, to a bunch of readers, and it's on me to convince them that it's worth their time. So I'm going to work extra, extra hard. Whereas if I was just working for a publisher, which maybe your IDW story bleeds into this, where they're talking about like, we're not in this to make a lot of money, I would slam my hands on the table and say, like, why are you in business then? Who hired you? You should
Right.
not be doing your job. You should be like sweating bullets, working way into the night, trying to turn this business upside down. Why? I don't know. Like, it stinks of laziness. It stinks of a lack of inspiration. And I look at the industry all around us and I just see nothing but failure and incompetence. And I'm disgusted by it.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I see that failure and incompetence too, and I also see ambivalence. Like there there are like these days I don't read any Marvel books, and at this point I'm only reading like maybe four DC books. And even that, like I'm a trade reader, so I'm kind of reading them 6 months after the fact.
Mhm.
The majority of what I'm seeing, not just from the big two, but like all the way down, is just this feeling of like no one actually cares or is energized or is passionate or is even just having fun with the work that they're doing. It just feels like work.
Mhm.
And that translates to the story because you'll read one of these books and you'll just be like, I can't say that this was good or bad. This is just competently made. And sure, in better times, competently made would be an okay thing because there would be the far superior stuff to kind of like buoy them a little bit. But when the best that you can ask for these days is competently made, I don't think that's good enough.
No.
Um,
And there's so much
and
competition.
yeah, yeah, and which drives me like when you hear certain creators say things like, "What do you mean I have to market my work? Is there any other industry where a creator has to market their work?" It's like, yes, every industry.
Yeah, I
Like
see.
like who do you think promotes movies? Like the actors aren't sitting there going, "Well, I'm not going to promote the movie. Put the producer in front of a camera and have them sell the movie." No, like you're the person like in front of the camera. You're the star. Like sell your product.
Yeah.
Um and like it's funny you mentioned the old Greek saying because an aspect of the IDW story that I've never shared before was we learned during the course of that meeting the reason that they opened this satellite office because they're based I think in San Diego or somewhere in California,
Hmm.
the main IDW offices. Um, they started this satellite office because the person in question that we were talking to, um, their family was based in Portland, and they didn't feel like relocating the family to California, nor did they feel like walking away from the company. So essentially, what the company was doing is every weekend, the company was paying for this person to fly back and forth from Portland to California,
Mm.
to split like his life up between work and home. And it's like, so you're telling me that there was this rider attached to this person's contract where like just imagine what like a first class ticket twice twice a week every week for the better part of like 4 or 5 years. Like just imagine what that adds up to on a company's list of expenditures.
First class.
It, I'm like I'm like I'm like, well, there's obviously I didn't say this because I thought that I wanted the job.
Yeah.
But in my head, I'm like, well, that's where all your money's going, man. Like, what are you doing?
Jeez. Man, I keep hearing stories like this. There's a lot of industries where there's a lot of like manager types or bigwigs, CEOs or whatever. They're
Mm,
just blowing money. It's like, oh, we'll make it back. What are you talking about?
right. Your
That's
books
horrifying.
your books sell maybe 1,100 copies if you're lucky.
Jeez.
Like, where's the money coming from? Because it's not coming from the licensing fees that you're paying out to Marvel to put out like yay Spider-Man Adventure Time Go, like, or whatever it's called. like
Yeah.
like where is this mythological money coming from?
It stinks to me of I don't know. They say never assign maliciousness to what can be described as incompetence, something like that.
Right,
Something's
right,
razor, Occam's razor. But I'm not sure. Like maybe for them, there's value in devaluing their companies so that they can be sold at a better price. But maybe that's just my little tinfoil hat style of thinking into like, I actually think these people are competent, but maybe they're just dumb. And maybe they're just wasting money because they think like, oh, I'm going to get another job anyway. I may as well just live it up while I'm here. But the idea of commuting however many hundreds of miles every week, like that's a red flag if I ever heard of it. Like I would never partner up with somebody who wasted that kind of money.
right.
My
Yeah,
goodness.
and so like on like I hear that and I'm like, okay, so basically they opened up this huge. It was like a two-floor office, and it was like him and an assistant, and they had a sound guy because they were planning on doing like parties and musical events there for the industry. I'm like, so they opened up this huge office, which because I know like Portland realty rates, I know is costing you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
They opened this up to you for your specific office when you could just do this job at home.
Man. You know, I hear stories like that and I just think like good. Let them go out of business. Like leave room for people who actually care about the job.
Yeah, I mean it breaks my heart because 10 plus years ago, like IDW was my company. Like I had made peace with the idea that I would never have the opportunity to write like Superman or something like that.
Mhm.
But I was like, well, maybe I could work on the Ninja Turtles, or maybe I could work on a Lock and Key miniseries. Like if Joe Hill starts, like letting in some breathing room and letting some other writers tell stories, like they have a lot of IP and property that the Rocketeer, they have a lot of stuff that I'm really invested in.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just I don't get how you can have that much star power in quotes and not know what to do with it.
There's only one explanation, I say. Incompetence, bad
Yes,
leadership. But
yes,
it's like Rocky, if you're a fan of Rocky at all.
yeah, I am.
His problem in Rocky 3 was that he lost the edge.
Right,
That, in Rocky 1, he was just this nobody, so he was willing to put in 150% as he trained.
Right.
And of course, Apollo Creed was this, he didn't even take the training seriously. He didn't take the fight seriously. So he ended up getting really embarrassed.
Right.
And I see us indie people as the Rocky equivalent now. And we're going up against this Titan that the only thing they have going for them is their reputations. I don't think they're putting out work that's worthy. So I guess we have that opportunity to give that huge knockout punch maybe in the next couple of years. I've always been thinking about like between, let's say, selling online, Indiegogo, that sort of thing. Obviously,
Hmm.
we could close about talking about your campaign a little more, but successful campaigns are great. I also want to see our stuff on comic shelves. Have you talked to any LCSs aside from your friend to get your book on their shelves?
That's something that we're gonna start planning with our next campaign, which will be launching in late August.
Okay.
Yeah, like that book is gonna be called The Gods Fear Me, and it's more designed to be easily broken up into smaller chapters. Like each volume is going to be about 32 to 48 pages, and like we can split that in half to 22 pages or 24 pages. Um, so yeah, like we're considering a retailer tier. We're considering reaching out to retailers. Um, I would love to see the book on book stands, but if it can be avoided, I'd really like to not have to go through Diamond. Like the answer that we've been giving so far is if an individual store owner reaches out to us, or if like we send out a mass emailer, and like X amount of the percentage of stores get back in touch with us, I'm happy to work on a case by case basis with whoever wants to buy our product.
Mhm.
But the way Diamond is set up, for the types of numbers that we'd actually be moving, I don't know that we'd be able to even get listed in Diamond, and B, we wouldn't even be breaking even by putting our books in the stores through those means.
Yeah, because
So
they take such a big cut.
yeah, I mean, basically, when you take the store's cut and shipping and Diamond's cut, you're looking at about 60 to 75% off whatever your retail price is.
After printing costs too.
Yeah, so like especially, and that's fine when you're like a Marvel or DC and you're printing up like 500, 600,000 copies and then overshipping them to stores.
Yeah.
But in our case, like let's say we have like between a 300 and 600 copy print run, and we end up printing like 1,000 or 1,500 copies just to have extra. Um, it doesn't it doesn't make financial sense for us to basically give those away for free just to be able to say we went through the proper channels. So yeah, like we're happy to talk to stores on an individual basis, but I don't know, Diamond is just kind of a rigged game that we can't afford to play right now.
Hmm. I guess have you heard of media mail as an option for post office?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like most of Samurai and Dinosaurs, except for like the international stuff,
Yes.
most of Samurai is going to be going out via media mail.
Okay. I feel like since that was invented, maybe that gives us an edge against Diamond, who's, I guess, the only thing that they can offer us as far as services. Like, I've been shipping books all week, and it's kind of a pain. You have to manually enter all this information, print out labels, get them off to the PO, and everything.
Right.
It's kind of expensive, but not too expensive. But I was imagining like there's a lot of LCSs in my area, and I'm sure I could just manually drive there and just say, "Do you want like 5 copies of my book?" and I'm not saying I could edge out Diamond anytime soon,
Right.
but maybe that's the kind of hustle that IDW and the big publishers are not willing to do. I wonder how many CEOs, like I really admire Peter Samedi of Alternate Comics, if you've heard of him.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, well, maybe to combat that, like Peter is working on some distribution project.
Yeah.
like maybe that could be an answer for smaller independent companies.
I would love that. And I just admire his hustle. I like to see that our peers are so, I don't know, we're so driven. It's so inspirational. I don't know. I see this giant vacuum in the industry due to laziness and incompetence. And I say, why not? This is our moment to strike. Um, so I don't know. I'm feeling very optimistic about the next, let's say 2019. Who knows what the next year is going to be like?
Sure.
Um, I don't know. I see successful campaigns like yours, and I say, wow, like there's something really special is happening.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's part of what made us commit to all of this. And yeah, likewise with Peter, like we've known him online for a handful of years now, and like he's a really cool guy, and I just got the chance to like talk with him on a stream last week for the first time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that dude is the definition of hustle.
Yeah.
Like he does so much work. I can't imagine what his daily schedule must be like.
I don't know. I joke with myself. I grew up in let's see, where I live in New Jersey, there's a lot of Asians, and a
Hmm.
lot of my Asian friends were like just nothing but whip cracking, like parents. Like you have to work extra, extra hard, and that's why I love Japanese people so much too. I don't know. I'm just joking, but like I see him and I'm like, oh man, he reminds me of all my friends where like the parents never let them have
Right,
any fun, but
right.
he's seeing the dividends now. I'm sure he's so hardworking. I admire him like crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%, man.
but we just need more of that. Like if we were all to vote for like who's going to lead this crusade, who's going to be the big publisher, I'm sure a lot of people would vote for him.
Oh yeah, no, I would like Peter's got this whole thing locked down, and yeah, going back to the distribution thing, like if he can figure out the chink in the armor when it comes to diamond and all that, if he can figure out like where the weak spot is, like he's got this on lock, and
Yeah.
like that could, I don't want to inflate his ego too much, but if people were serious about trying to save the direct market itself, that he could be responsible for doing it.
I don't think that's an understatement. That really he is somebody to pay very close attention to.
Yeah, totally.
Um, man, I like ending on such high notes. I guess is there anything else you want to plug or mention before we? I think we've done about an hour.
Sure, man.
Um,
Well, let's see. Okay. Samurai and Dinosaurs is in demand currently and will be until July 8th when we'll be closing down the storefront.
mhm.
We're trying all we can to reach 12,000 before we shut it down, because at 12,000 we unlock a huge 10-page uh, gallery that's going to be going at the back of the book, featuring artists like Hyung Lee, Narwhal, Carl O'Roe, and plenty more.
Mhm.
So we're hoping that we can make that happen, and then also keep an eye out for late August when we start up with the Gods Fear Me, which
Okay.
I can't. I'm still securing stuff with the artist, so I can't say who's drawing it, but it's a post-apocalyptic, post-invasion Lovecraftian story of vengeance focusing on a one-armed android named Kedzie and her quest to track down and destroy the alien being that took her arm in the first place.
That's cool, man. Jeez, it'll definitely let me know when that goes live. We could do another one of these if you like. That sounds
I'd
really interesting.
I'd be happy to, man.
Cool. Well, you guys have heard it here. Be sure to keep an eye out for the next project and take a look at Samurai and Dinosaurs, which is still up on demand, which means basically it has already met its goal, but it's still accepting orders. So there's still plenty of time to order your book. And how can we reach you on Twitter and stuff?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at chibi_Mike, and you can also find me on YouTube at the Chibi Mike, all one word.
All right. Well, Sorry again that I was late.
Oh, it's all good, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I could tell that there's a lot of passion underneath all these projects, and I really hope. I don't know. I hope the best for everybody, but specifically for you and your family. You've told me about your family a little bit off air, and I really I want to see the best for you guys. I hope this all works out.
Thanks so much, man. It means a
Yeah.
lot. And I
Thanks
was
for
happy to
coming.
hang out
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's do it again. So
anytime.
thanks. Yeah, everybody who's listening. I'm always amazed when anybody listens to my blabbering. Thank you guys for coming. Tomorrow I've got another interview coming, so if you have time and you just want to listen to something fun, uh, be sure to tune in next tomorrow. And yeah, I'll see you guys around. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
Later.